Hello everyone! In this video, we are going to look at Pythagorean identity and basic knowledge for all the trigonometric functions. Say we have a unit circle. The unit circle means we have the center at the origin with radius 1. At this point x, y, let's draw a vertical dotted line onto the x-axis. We formed a right angle, and that's it. The base of this triangle is x. The height of this triangle is y. So we have this triangle. Now, we know that cosine of the angle equals to adjacent over hypotenuse. In other words, cosine of t equals to x, and sine of the angles equals to opposite over hypotenuse equals to y. In other words, sine t equals to y. Therefore, we make the conclusion that at the point x, y, which is cosine t, sine t. Now, in algebra class, we learned that for a circle, we can find the equation by x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals to r squared. Now, the circle is centered at 0, 0, and with radius 1. Therefore, the circle formula becomes x squared plus y squared equals to 1. Can we connect the knowledge that we know together? And therefore, we find that our x, which is cosine t square plus sine t square equals to 1, and the formal way that we write out cosine t square is cosine square t plus sine square t equals to 1, and that is our Pythagorean identity. Now, let's determine the sign of the trig function in each quadrant. In quadrant 1, the x value is positive, the y value is positive. In quadrant 2, the x value is negative, the y value is positive. In quadrant 3, the x values are negative and the y values are also negative. And in quadrant 4, the x values are positive and the y values are negative. Because of the fact that we know x equals to cosine t and y equals to sine t, we can conclude the following. In the first quadrant, cosine function is positive. That means its reciprocal function, secant, which would also be positive. Sine is positive, therefore its reciprocal function is also positive. Tangent, it is opposite over adjacent, y over x. Positive number over positive number, outcome will also be positive. If tangent is positive, cotangent would also be positive. Second quadrant, we see that the x value is negative, so the cosine will be negative. If cosine is negative, secant will also be negative, whereas sine is the y value which is positive. Then its reciprocal function will also be positive. Since tangent, it is y over x, positive number over negative number, outcome which will be negative, so cotangent will also be negative. In third quadrant, both cosine and sine are negative, therefore the reciprocal function will also be negative. Tangent, which is y over x, a negative number over negative number, which will be positive, so tangent is positive. Cotangent will also be positive. And in the fourth quadrant, we see that cosine is positive. Its reciprocal function will also be positive. Sine function is negative. Its reciprocal function will also be negative. Tangent, which is y over x, negative over positive, so tangent will also be negative. The quick way to make conclusion of what we have, we see that in the first quadrant, all the functions are positive. And in the second quadrant, we see that sine and its reciprocal function is positive. In the third quadrant, we see that tangent and its reciprocal function is positive. In the fourth quadrant, we see that cosine and its reciprocal function is positive. Now, what we see is all students take calculus, or you can also call it as a CAST system, C-A-S-T. Example number 1. Sine t equals to 5 over 12 and t in quadrant 2. Find cosine t. Let's try to make a sketch. T is in quadrant 2, so we have t in quadrant 2. Then now we usually will draw the terminal side, draw a vertical line onto the x-axis, onto the x-axis, not y-axis. Then now we have a right angle. Sine of the angle is opposite over hypotenuse. In other words, we have opposite 5 hypotenuse 12. Now we have a missing side. What is that side equals to? You can use the Pythagorean theorem to help you to find the third side. Then you will have your answer. Or the other way that we have learned in this video, it is Pythagorean identity. For Pythagorean identity, we know that cosine squared t plus sine squared t equals to 1. We can use this identity to help us to find the answer. We have cosine squared t plus sine is given 5/12. Now let's simplify. We have 5/12 squared, which is 25/144 equals to 1. We then will subtract 25/144 on both sides. Make sure you have the same denominator in order to perform subtraction. We find that cosine squared t equals to 119/144. So that now when we take the square root on both sides, we will have positive and negative. Now taking square root of 119 is square root of 119, and taking square root of 144, which is 12. The question is, if cosine t in the second quadrant is positive or negative. Now we are going to use the amazing magical spell CAST, C-A-S-T, to help us. In the second quadrant, we find that we have the letter S. That means only sine function and its reciprocal is positive. The rest of the functions are negative. Therefore, we know that the final answer, cosine t equals to negative square root of 119/12. Thank you for watching my video.